Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I'm going to be reviewing VHS 2, which I don't have a physical copy of this. I think I owned it at one time and I think I got rid of it for whatever reason. I did that way back in the day. I got rid of a lot of stuff that I really enjoyed and I just ended up buying it all back. So just don't get rid of physical media. If you love physical media, keep it. Keep it. I'm telling you, if you don't have the room for it, that's one thing. But if you do, stop making excuses. Just keep it. Anyway, VHS 2 came out 1 year after VHS 1. That was in 2012. This one is in 2013. And I was surprised back when this came out how quickly it came out. Apparently, with the success of the original movie, they bum rushed to get another one out. And I don't blame them. VHS 2, for me, is weaker compared to VHS 1. But with that being said, it's a really, really solid horror anthology found footage movie. And yes, it maintains, pretty much like all the series does so far, it maintains being a found footage anthology, just like the first movie. I've always liked the first film better. I think, and I said this kind of in my previous review for the first movie, I've always thought that the higher budget given to this movie kind of harms it just a little bit, just a slight bit, because a lot of things amp up, a lot more CGI, a lot more of this, a lot more of that. The shorts within here don't have the directors I thought they had. They had Adam Wingard come back. I don't think Ty West was in this according to the directors listed on IMDb. A lot of the names, like David Bruckner, he wasn't here either. I don't know many of these people, but then maybe that's the reason VHS is better than VHS 2. I believe there was also a different title for this at one time called VHSS. I could have sworn that was the original title of it, but I don't know. I remember when Chris Stuckman reviewed this, the very famous movie reviewer, and it shocked me that this had come out as fast as it had, because I just fell in love with the first VHS, and I really, really liked this one too, even back when I first saw it. I never really thought it was disappointing, I just thought it was a lesser movie. You know, like, there's Friday the 13th films I think are lesser than certain movies I like in the franchise a lot more. But overall, I typically enjoy all of them, in some fashion or form. The VHS series is very wish-washy, and as we get to the next entry after this review, you'll see what I'm talking about. But for right now, let's talk about VHS 2. Instead of having like 9 or 10 directors, there's there's actually about 6 of them. I don't know how many had to co-op or anything. There's only 5 shorts, so at least one of them had 2 people working on it. The wraparound story is called Tape 49. Basically, there are 2 private investigators who are hired to go find a missing student after they busted another guy sleeping with some girl, I guess his secretary or something, I don't know. Once again, just like with the opening of this movie, there is a lot of nudity in this movie, just so you know, ahead of time. But they're going on an investigation. They have to break into this missing student's house. I think his mom is the one that contacted them to go looking for him. And when they get there, they find, I think it's this one, not the first one, that has a bunch of TVs. Not just like one TV, but a bunch of TVs and VCRs and a bunch of black cassette tapes, just like in the original movie. But not the same room, not the same house, so on and so on. But they do notice a couple of weird things. There's some blood here and there in the rooms. There also happens to be a live stream on a laptop that's filming through the webcam directly at them when they come inside. That's kind of weird. They kind of wonder what's up with that. And so when this happens, this wraparound story, of course, just like the previous movie, every time one of the shorts from another director ends, of one of the VHS tapes that are put into the player by the girl of the 2 private investigators, we actually watch, in between each short, another little tack-on of their storyline of what's going on. Now mind you, this movie's about an hour and a half long. It's not as long as the previous one, and that's perfect, because the pacing of the wraparound, I don't know how much you could stretch it out for what it is, but I think that the wraparound itself, for me personally, might be the best short in the entire movie. I think that the finale of it, the last couple of pieces in between the last few shorts, really shocked me a lot. There's some really good stuff in here because of those moments. But again, the ending of it is generally creepy. There's some really creepy stuff in the wraparound through every part of it throughout the entire movie, and I love it. I really think it's the best highlight of the entire movie. It's the most shocking, in my opinion, possibly, of the entire movie. But let's move along to the first real short. I think this one is directed and written by Adam Wingard. It is called Phase 1 Clinical Trials. Basically, a fellow who got in some kind of car accident or something lost his eye in the car accident. This happens to be played by Adam Wingard himself, of course, the director of Godzilla vs. Kong. Fantastic movie. You're Next, one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that slasher. If you haven't seen You're Next, you're missing out. I've been referencing that for the last couple of days for some reason. This one is mainly about this guy who got a new eye, but it's like a sci-fi type of story, really. But kind of not. It's, again, a great example of the budget being higher than the previous movie, therefore kind of harming this movie a little bit. It's entertaining as a short. It's not really satisfying, you know what I mean? Adam Wingard's new eye is robotic. It has a camera inside of it. That's how we're seeing everything that we're watching through this found footage lens that's going on. And throughout this short, he thinks that he may now be haunted in this beautiful freaking house that he lives in. I don't know how he afforded it. I don't know what this guy does for a living, but it's a gorgeous house. It's like the one house from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. If you played that, you know what I'm talking about. Mad Dog's house. It reminds me of that house a little bit. But anyway, he starts to see what he thinks might be ghosts in this haunting, and apparently he's only seeing it through that one eye. And it's a little weird. It's a little bit more weird for my taste. I wasn't the biggest fan of this one, but it's at least entertaining. It has some weird sexual escapade about halfway through it to be a 20-minute long short, and that was odd. Yeah, it's just an odd short. It's a great example, again, like I said, of the budget being a little too high for these, because you have to be less creative a lot of the time. To be fair, you've never seen this before. Moving along to the next one. This one is called A Ride in the Park. Basically, a guy who does extreme biking out in the woods by himself. He finds a woman who's screaming and yelling, and there's some people limping towards her, and she all of a sudden claims that she's been bitten by them, and she has like a seizure thing. She goes crazy. I think she like vomits up blood, and then she just turns into a zombie, and she bites the biker guy. Now this sounds dumb, right? It sounds dumb as a concept, but I promise you, the actual execution of this story is fantastic. It's really fun. It's a funny story, which is odd. Our biker guy that we've watched that has a GoPro on top of his helmet, he turns into a zombie, and then he just kind of meander around and does stuff. Now this is the thing. It's actually funny. There's some moments in here that I really, really enjoyed about this particular short. It's probably the funniest of all the VHS shorts of all time. And when we get to some of the later parts of it, it's kind of sad, you know? Like the finale of this short is kind of sad. It's a weird kind of sad, too. Doesn't really logically make any sense, but it was sad enough, and the logic of the story was weird enough, that I kind of liked it. I thought it was nice. It's one of the better ones in this movie for me. The next story in here is called Safe Haven, and this one is a little another bit of an example of one of the shorts having too much of a budget, in my opinion, and having a little bit too much CGI. Basically, there is a group of people who are filming at this Indonesian cult, and while they're out there, they happen to notice that there are kids in this cult too, like that have been sucked in. They're being taught. They have to stay inside of this mountain temple thing all the time, and they meet the cult leader. They start to do an interview with him, and things go horribly, horribly wrong. Now again, I'm with most of this short. I like how most of this short is using practical effects. It's probably the longest short. It might be about good 35 minutes. It's a pretty long short to be in this movie. And the amount of budget that seems to go specifically to this particular short is kind of crazy to me. But it's well made, it's well shot, it feels professional. If you were going to make an actual interview documentary type of thing about a cult, that's what this seems like. And it actually looks good. It feels like it's well made. I like it, I appreciate it. I think the ending is good for the most part, but again, the CGI here, like one particular person explodes in this short. It's a very gory short, by the way, just so you know. Very, very gory short. It's a little much. The CGI is. Everything else I like. The cult story, the characters that we're following in this interview group that are going to this place for this documentary, they're all good. Everybody puts in a good performance, and pretty much every single short in the entire VHS 2 movie. But this one, I think people put a little bit more into their acting and into their improv on the found footage style. I really liked all that. It goes a little insane, but I think it was effective, and that's really what counts, I think, a lot of the time. Was it entertaining? Absolutely, 100%. Moving along to the last short in this, called Slumber Party Alien Abduction. Of course, a play on Slumber Party Massacre. This, to me, might very well be... It's either the weakest or it's the next to weakest, aside from the one about the eye. The mechanical, robotic eye or whatever. This one is just about a group of kids, and it's like... They have a camera, and he has a sister who has a boyfriend, and they have a house out by a lake. And while they're out there, with all the woods and everything behind their house and the lake and everything else, aliens just show up and start trying to abduct them. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some humor in here that works. Some of it's just it's plumb out weird, and I don't like it. I think it's kind of uncomfortable, weird, you know? Not in a good way either. It's not like a Freddy Got Fingered type of humor. It's just, it's a little much, you know? The writing is very weak on this one, I think. The acting is very weak on this one, being mainly teenagers and kids and that kind of thing. I don't hate it. I don't want anybody to think I hate this short. But it is, to me, either the weakest or the next to weakest, aside from the Adam Wingard story about the eye, in this movie. I just think there's not really much to this. There's a lot of CGI in this one. A lot of CGI in it. And it's just, it doesn't really have, you know, a lot of shorts need to have a real good, concise kind of storytelling. Number one, there's too many characters in this one. Number two, there's a little bit too much of the teenage aspect. It doesn't feel like VHS 2. And it doesn't have to, don't get me wrong. What does VHS feel like? Well, I'm used to the original 2012 movie, the year before this, feeling very low grade, having kind of a pixelated type of camera most of the time, having a cheaper budget, feeling like real homemade things, like the second honeymoon, or the honeymoon thing. You know what I'm talking about. The second honeymoon storyline about the husband and wife on their honeymoon and like the Grand Canyon and everything. It felt very kind of low grade. It felt like you found a home movie. These movies, this short, or these shorts, whatever, in this VHS 2 movie, a lot of the time don't feel that way. They don't have this homegrown feel. They don't feel organic, I think is really the word I want to use for it. For me, that harms it a lot. It just does. But again, we finish off this one. It's out of the way. It's weak. It's not horrible, but it's weak, and it gets out of the way. And then we do the final wrap-up for this movie, tying back to Tape 49, or whatever that original short was called, and it's really, really solid. And it ends on a really good note. And it really makes this movie that's mostly weaker than the first one better. And for some reason, a lot of people consider this one to be their favorite, and it kind of surprises me. If you guys can go back, and if it's still on Tubi, they had the first 3 movies still on Tubi. 94, of course, is on Shudder. They just put it out on DVD. 99 is coming out. I'm curious what a lot of people are going to say if they go back on Tubi, if it happens to still be there. Rewatch all 3 of these movies, and let me know what you think about it. I want to know what people, for whatever reason, if they still think VHS 2 is the best. It kind of surprises me that people like Chris Stuckman, I believe, said that he thought it was the best. I don't get where people are coming from. It's a very solid flick. It's very watchable, very fun, very well made. It just has its problems as part of the VHS series and whatever for me. But overall, I like it. It looks good. Everybody put in their effort, and it's fun for the most part. It just has some flaws. Some very few flaws that kind of bring it down just a little bit for me. There's not really any music, by the way. I have my little list in front of me. There's not really much music in this. It doesn't really have to be. It's found footage. I don't need that. It doesn't really matter. If I had to rate VHS 2 on a 5-star basis, as you can tell, it's going to be a weaker rating than the first one. I think VHS 2 is overall good, but it's flawed a lot. It has a lot of flaws. The big one, again, being CGI. There's just too much of it. There's just too much of it in this movie. And it harms the movie. I'm sorry. I feel that way. I'm going to be repetitive about it, but it harms it. If I had to rate this movie VHS 2 or VHS-S or whatever it was called back in the day, I have to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. That's a really high rating for me. A lot of stuff makes it about a 3 out of 5 when I feel like some of it kind of meanders a little bit. For me, I think this one deserves a 4 out of 5. It's entertaining. I have a good time. I laugh quite a bit while I watch this. I cringe sometimes. There's some good tension and things like that Indonesian cult story. But overall, it gets a 4 out of 5 stars from me. I lean almost to giving it a 3, and I thought about it, but I was like, nah, I think it deserves a 4 for me. Anyway, what are your thoughts on VHS 2? Once again, I would love to hear what a lot of VHS fans like myself have to say about this. It's one of my favorite franchises out there. I love it. It's except for the next one I have to struggle to talk about soon. Yeah. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Put them down below, guys. Thank you for watching all. God bless you all. And tune in for the next review for VHS Viral, the third and the killer of the franchise for a long time. We'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. God bless you all. Goodbye.